Hey BookTube, this is Friday Reads. I'm Jen and I talk about audiobooks, and I have a lot of books to tell you about this week because I had a lot of time in the car on a long drive to listen, so I got a lot of listening done. Okay, I'm going to start off with Follow Me Back. This is by A.L. Jackson. It is book 2 in her Fight For Me series, and on audio it's narrated by Andi, Arndt, and Jo Arden. These two narrators do this sort of thing all the time, and they're really good at it. So always a pleasure to listen, always spot on in terms of the tone of the book, the characterizations, all of it was wonderful. So high points for the narration. The story is about an ER doctor and a woman who is going through a very messy divorce, and she has other things going on in her life. So it's their romance, and while it is the standard romance, there's a little more to it than that. So I like the way that A.L. Jackson, at least in the books of hers that I've read so far, tend to have a little more going on than just the standard thing. She does throw in a little bit of a twist, so that's always a little bit unexpected. So I ended up giving that one 4 stars. The Only One is by Lauren Blakely, and it is narrated by Andi and Zach, Andi Arndt and Zachary Weber. It is book, I think, 2 in her 1 series, like The Only One, The Hot One, The Funny One, I don't know, 1 is always in the title. And then it's also number 50 something, I think, in her series 1001 Nights, Dark Nights. I don't know. Anyway, it's 1 in a series. And the narration was fantastic. Those are my 2 favorite romance narrators. If I can't have Zach Weber, I'll take Jo Arden, but Zach Weber is always my favorite when it comes to romance. And with Andi Arndt, you know, that combination is perfect. So once again, lots of points, lots of high points on the narration. The book is okay. I didn't love it. I thought it was just fine. It was a second chance romance. What I appreciated was that the conflict in the plot really was much more about them getting to know each other again. So it wasn't as strong as it might otherwise have been. So, you know, that's probably why I say it was just okay. But I enjoyed it a lot. I mean, you know, Zach and Andi, they always make it better. So I ended up giving that one 3 stars. Down to My Soul is by Kennedy Ryan. It is book 2 in her Soul duology. And it's narrated on audio by Kennicott and Wen Ross. And I talked about the first book in this series a couple of weeks ago, and the same things hold true on the narration. This is done in a style where one narrator doesn't just narrate one point of view, but they take on the character that they're narrating, and so whenever that character is speaking, they are the ones doing the speaking, even if it is within the context of another point of view being told. So I like that style. It's very refreshing. It is interesting to listen to, and Kennicott was really great in this particular story. She did a Southern Georgia accent that was spot on, just spot on. And everything else about her character that she did was wonderful. Wen Ross, I had trouble with him. I personally thought the casting was a little off, but you know, the style of the narration kind of made up for it. It's a rock and roll romance, and this is the conclusion. So that was fine. I ended up giving that one 3 stars. And that was really more like 2.5 rounded up, primarily because I kept getting pulled out of the story because of the narration. And The Year We Hid Away is by Sarina Bowen. It is book 2 in her Ivy Years series, and it was narrated by Saskia Maarleveld and Podehl. These 2 narrators I have always heard before in YA fantasy, so it was really interesting to hear them in this genre. And I liked it a lot. I think they were well suited to the story. Saskia Maarleveld, I've had problems with in the past, but I think in this particular case, her voice suited the character really, really well. she tends to sound really kind of whispery. And if you think of her voice like a shape or a thing, it would be very round with very soft edges. I know. That's just how I think of her. She tends to sound a little bit like this, even when she's being emphatic. You know, there's a softness to her voice, which in some cases is not good, but in this case was very good. Nick Podehl is always good. He's always good. My only problem with his narration, it would have been perfect, other than the fact that he made the female characters that he voiced sound really nasal. I just thought, at first I thought it was funny, and then I thought, ugh, I wish you weren't doing it that way. I wish he'd just gone for a higher pitch instead of a really nasally high pitch. But yeah, that's incidental. Overall, I think the narration was very enjoyable. And the book was enjoyable too. I like this series that Sarina Bowen has done. It's a college new adult romance, and it's about a guy who was a hockey star, and his dad died and his mom kind of went on a downward spiral into drugs, and so he has a young sister who is like 12 years younger than he is. So he went and got her out of their house and brought her to his dorm room where she is not allowed to live, but he doesn't know what else to do. So he is basically taking her to school, taking care of her, and then doing all of his coursework, and he's very busy. And then the other main character is a girl who in high school was a hockey star, and her dad is a well-known, well-paid hockey coach, and he has been accused of molesting some young players. So she became a pariah in her high school and among her friends because, you know, it was like, oh, your dad is that guy and we don't want anything to do with you. So she changes her name and like changes it legally and then goes to college and leaves that person behind. But her parents are pursuing her to testify on her dad's behalf in his defense, and she's just not sure she wants to do that. So the nice thing about this story was you had all that going on, and that provided the basis for the conflict. But then it kind of twisted up at the end. I mean, there were a few extra things thrown in there that I really liked. And I think I'm going to keep going with this series because I'm really enjoying it. This was interesting because although it is technically sports romance, neither person played sports. They had put it aside in light of all the other stuff that was going on. So happy ending, resolved really well, and I ended up giving that one a solid 4 stars. Then I picked up Midnight at the Electric by Jodi Lynn Anderson. This is narrated from 3 points of view by Fiona Hardingham, Bailey Carr, and Jorjeana Marie. Jorjeana Marie starts out, and she was incredible. She was so good because the character that she narrates is very emotionally detached. And she just captured that. And not just captured it, but over the course of the story, when the character was kind of slowly changing, she just tracked it. It was really good. I got to the end of the book and I thought, man, when I think about the narration, she did that so well. So I always like her anyway, and so that was really enjoyable. Fiona Hardingham, same thing. She's just incredible as a narrator. She narrates a character who is young and vivacious and a little bit judgmental, but very positive, and she just pulled it off really well. And then Bailey Carr, actually, by comparison, was not nearly as good. But it wasn't that she wasn't a good narrator. It was just that they were so outstanding. And I think she did an okay job with her character. I don't know if I loved her narration, but the character would have been hard to pin down because the character goes through a lot of change throughout the course of the story. The story is hard to describe. It's told from 3 points of view, like I said. We start out with Jorjeana Marie's character, and she is an orphan in 2065 who has grown up in a group home. Her parents died in the Great Floods when global warming happened and the water came in Miami. So she leaves Miami because she has been chosen to become a colonist on Mars. And so it's the couple of months before she is scheduled to leave. The space program has been relocated from Florida to Wichita, Kansas. And so she has a distant cousin in Kansas that she goes to stay with while she prepares to go on this trip to Mars for the rest of her life. And so it is the story of her getting to know this cousin. And this is a girl who, like I say, is very emotionally detached. She is just not a joiner. She doesn't feel comfortable in groups of people, on teams, working with others. She tends to be very direct and very blunt, and she upsets people sometimes by the way she is and the way she speaks. And so she just takes that as, well, this is how I am. I don't know how to be anything else. And so kind of realizing about herself that maybe that isn't all that she has to be, starts happening. And so that's a wonderful character development to watch. And she finds a journal when she goes to stay with this distant cousin. The distant cousin, by the way, is an older woman who is kind of starting to go into dementia. So she finds these journals and she starts reading them. And the journals are from the second point of view. And that's what Bailey Carr voices. And this is a young girl in 1930s Kansas during the time of the Dust Bowl. And her little sister is starting to show signs of dust pneumonia, which is what they called it. And basically it's that there's so much dust and so little rain in the area that people, when they start to breathe in so much dust, it just turns to mud in their lungs, and their lungs start to shut down and not function properly. She is desperate to get her daughter out of, or not her daughter, her sister out of there, and she doesn't know how she's going to do it, but she just feels the need to go do it. The title of the book, Midnight at the Electric, comes from a charlatan who comes to town, and she thinks that he has the answer that's going to cure her little sister. So it's her story. And then the third point of view are some letters that the character in the Dust Bowl finds, but then also the character who's going to be the colonist on Mars also finds. And those are letters written from Fiona Hardingham's character, who lives in England and who's in the 1920s. And her family has gotten wealthy by through manufacturing and the war, World War I. And so she has a relationship in a stone cottage that's been abandoned on the outskirts of their estate, with a guy who has been in the war and has become disfigured, and he kind of hides out there to get away from all the judgment and the, you know, looks of the people who pity him or don't want to be, you know, around him because he's been so disfigured. So it's her relationship with him. So all of the points of view converge in the end, and it's just such a good story. It's so unlike anything I've read recently, at least. It's kind of YA literary fiction, or historical, I guess you might say. It's really, the historical part comes in more with the Dust Bowl than anything else. But even at that, it's much more of a character study. So I loved it. I ended up giving that one 4.5 stars. I don't know. I may round that up to 5. I'm not sure. It's a definite 4.5 though. Then I had 3 sci-fi books, which I thoroughly enjoyed. The first of those was Time Salvager. This is by Wesley Chu, and it is on audio, but I don't like the narrator. I sampled the audio a long time ago and knew that even speeding him up, I wasn't going to really like him. So I'm glad I did that, because as I read the book, that voice would have been so wrong for this character, the main character here. This is adult time travel. And it's about a guy who is a salvager. He goes back and gets stuff in the past and brings it to the future, because the future is not a good place. Earth is really not a good place. And there are big corporations who will pay big money to these salvagers who will go back and get stuff and then come back. It takes a lot of training and time, and they are graded in tiers. If you're a tier 1 salvager, which this guy is, you're really good at your job. And so he goes back and to get something in a very difficult situation, and then ends up bringing back with him a scientist. And that is a capital offense. You do not bring people back from the past. And so they're on the run constantly. So it's the story of that. Got a kind of a surprise ending, interesting, which left me satisfied, but it does provide for the next book in the series. And there is one more book in the series. I don't know if there were going to be 3. I'm not convinced that the second one won't end on a place where I want the 3rd book, and I don't think there is a 3rd book. So, I don't know. But I liked it. I liked it a lot. I thought it was worth reading. And you know, for me to say it's worth reading in print when I can't listen to it or I choose not to listen to it, then it must be good. So I gave it 4 stars. I picked up MarsOne by Jonathan Maberry, narrated by MacLeod Andrews, when my friend Karen said, it's out, it's out. It had just come out. And this is a YA sci-fi novel. And MacLeod Andrews does this kind of thing so incredibly well. He just can get a young guy, you know, late teens, young adult, new adult kind of a person, you know, on the brink of not being a teenager anymore. He just gets that so right every time. He just does it so well. He's able to give voice to the character in such a way that you just believe it. You really do. There is never a time in the stories that he narrates that I've ever pulled out and, you know, other than something extraneous going on, such good narration. I cannot rave enough. It was really good. The story is really good too. It's about a young guy who is kind of like a senior in high school age, and he has been selected with his family to go be the first colonists on Mars. I don't know why that happened twice in a week, but it did. And so the first part of the book is about him getting ready to leaving his friends, leaving his girlfriend. And then the second part of the book is about the journey to Mars. And so interesting on both counts, because space travel in this time, it's in the near future, in the late 2020s. It has all been privatized, which actually that's starting to happen now in the space program. And so it's all been privatized, and the way that they get their funding is through sponsorship and ads on reality TV shows. So this guy ends up on a reality TV show with his girlfriend, and they do it because his girlfriend ends up set for life. She's got so much money that she's being paid to do this reality TV show. But it also explores what it's like to be in the spotlight and all that celebrity and how this guy is dealing with, you know, leaving his friends behind for forever. You know, he's going to go to Mars. He's going to be a colonist on Mars. He's not coming back. So that's the whole first half of the book. And then the second half of the book, once he gets into space, acclimating to space, getting ready to be on Mars, the slow letting go of all of the things on Earth that he's never going to go back to. So great story, really good story, really well told, exceptionally well told. And I ended up giving that one 4 stars. And then the last book that I read was 14 by Peter Clines. This was narrated on audio by Ray Porter. And if I was raving about MacLeod Andrews, oh boy, Ray Porter was magnificent. This man is so good. He's so good at narration, especially for this kind of a book, which was adult sci-fi / horror. Although I'll get to that in a minute, but well, actually, it won't take me long to tell you that Ray Porter was, like I say, magnificent. I cannot say one bad thing about this narration, nothing. Anyway, so this is an interesting story. When I first heard about this, I heard cockroaches and horror, and I thought, no thank you, no thank you. I do not like to be grossed out. I do not like to be scared. And that just, those two things together just made me go, no, 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 no. But once again, my friend Karen never steers me wrong when it comes to sci-fi. She really enjoyed it. And so I thought, okay, well, I can always stop if I get in and I start getting the willies, you know? So I'm glad I picked it up, because it's about a guy who's really going nowhere in his life, and he moves into this apartment because he hears about it from a friend, and it's really cheap. It's in LA, And some weird stuff is going on in this apartment building. So it's all about the people in the apartment building that he becomes friends with and the things that they begin to discover about the apartment building. So really, one really good ride. There are cockroaches, but they're not creepy. And that was so incidental to the plot that I didn't even care. It's really good. I loved it. Between the story and the narration, I ended up giving that one an easy 5 stars. So that was last week. There was a lot of books last week. And a lot of variety. It was nice to get all that sci-fi and then all that romance. And I was looking for more sci-fi. If you know more sci-fi books that you could suggest that are in the vein of those, I love books that are in space. And 14, you know, that was interesting. It wasn't set in space, but it was just really good. So if you know of any of those, let me know, because I would love to listen to them, especially if they're really well narrated. So right now I am listening to Carve the Mark by Veronica Roth. It is narrated from 2 points of view by Emily Rankin and Austin Butler. And I got that out. I already owned it, and I've already listened to it back when it came out. And I wanted to listen to it again because the sequel came out, and it's called The Fates Divide, and it is narrated by a whole slew of people. I looked briefly at the narrators, and I know I saw Austin Butler. I think I saw Emily Rankin. I'm pretty sure I saw MacLeod Andrews, and I may have seen some other people. So if I did, I'll put them here on the screen. But yeah, I really wanted to just refresh my memory because there's a lot that happens in Carve the Mark that I knew I had forgotten. So I'm kind of glad that I'm doing that because it's a break from all the romance. Yeah, you know, me and romance, I can't do without it, but it is nice to have a break. So that's this weekend and last week and the week ahead. And of course, I would love to know if you've read any of the books I've talked about because I always want to hear your thoughts. So let's talk about that in comments and have a great weekend. I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.